Thank you very much. My name is ISHIUCHI Miyako. Professor Yoshioka has spoken a lot about me and my work already. And it's indeed more or less the first time for me to speak in front of such a great gathering. Especially, I am from Kanto, Tokyo area, so I do not know much about Kyoto Prize. So I accepted the offer for invitation to speak at this symposium, but I feel a bit nervous, but I try my best in my talk. I am a photographer, but I have never been trained to take photograph. I learned to take photograph through doing myself. And I think we are still in the process of making history for photography, and it's been about 40 years since I began photography, but still I feel that I am very fresh in doing photography. And as Professor Yoshioka mentioned, since 2007 I have been photographing Hiroshima as my main projects. And why do I feel that I have to photograph Hiroshima? Why am I still doing this? It relates to the Yokosuka story, the very first project I did as photographer. And I loved doing darkroom work. Rather than taking photography, I decided to take photos because I wanted to work in dark room. I loved these grains and the particles of photography, and that fascinated me. So I had such an urge to take photographs, otherwise I cannot develop in the dark room. So first I was taking the natural objects such as trees and ocean and so forth, and I began to think that I have to take photographs of something more concrete. And one thing came to my mind. Where is the city which is most distant from me, and which is the city where I had the most serious injuries and hurt? And that is Yokosuka. When I entered the elementary school at the age of 6, I moved to Yokosuka from Gunma Prefecture. Gunma is a landlocked city, but Yokosuka here is nearby Tokyo Bay on a coast. And one important feature of this city is the presence of the American military base. So from 6 years old to 19 years old, I spent my life of that time, adolescence, where I had a lot of growth, physical and psychological, in the city of Yokosuka with a big American military base. And as an outsider, I came to see and find many things. And so this is the first photography project called Yokosuka Story. It just happened that around that time, a Japanese pop song by Yamaguchi Momoe, Yokosuka Story, was very popular among the Japanese people. So Yokosuka Story, well, actually, this is not a title I myself gave to this debut series of my photography. I decided to take those photographies now entitled Yokosuka Story by someone else. So those are the Yokosuka Story photographs. Well, Yokosuka, as I said, is a city of the U.S. military base. So in a sense, people tend to look at those images as something like a documentary with some social issues and understanding behind. But Thomas Shomei and Moriyama Daiso are very famous photographers from Japan. Their Yokosuka photos are about gutter alleys where American military men were found in many numbers. Actually, when I was small, elementary school, I was told by my parents not to walk on this gutter alley street because of fear of being raped. So it was considered as a very dangerous area. So that was gutter alley. So when I strolled around in the street of Yokosuka for the first time with the camera, I was so afraid of that district. So I really couldn't take photos because that was the area where I was told not to go to by my parents. So even if I was carrying a camera myself, I couldn't take photos in that area. So that was the kind of traumas I sustained by me. I lived in Yokosuka, as I mentioned, but I didn't know all the streets or districts in Yokosuka. So I bought a map and I placed a mark on the map whenever I took a certain photograph in Yokosuka. So this is the gutter alley where girls were told not to walk. So this is a photo a long time ago. Afro-American soldier and a Japanese girl are walking together. I think that was a Christmas day. Today you don't see those things, but you can see a series of flags, national flags, flying in the sky. So in the past, we used to see such strings of flags, but today, Gutter Alley is not what it used to be. It's such a bright street, not dangerous at all, very healthy, and Yokosuka city as a whole has become a very sunny place, at least on the surface, but it goes really deeper in the meaning. So my footsteps, my journey, my past, part of it, important part of it, lies in Yokosuka, and I wanted to settle, come to terms with my past. And my debut as a photographer is somewhat late. In the 30s, I began serious photography taking. I was not trained as a photographer, so I went through trial and errors as a photographer. So I took photos of Yokosuka, and this is alley I talked about. And for me, this is not a record. This is my memory. That's how I see my photos. How do I recall my memories, and how I am going to take a good, serious, honest look at my past journey. And that's I began to take photograph, and that's how I regarded my photograph taking. And this is not me, this little girl, but this girl recalls me when I was small. This girl came running toward me, and I took this snapshot of her. Of course, she is now perhaps 40 years old or so. When I was taking photograph of Yokosuka, what I was thinking was as follows. I wanted to take a serious look at my past, my journey. And by so doing, I wanted to seriously think how my present and future are going to unfold itself in front of me. So this is a sort of a cliff, a slope in the alley I mentioned earlier, a very nicely tile, and even today this building stands, and it says the U.S. Navy up there. And whenever I go to Yokosuka, I go to this place and say greetings to this building. Hey, you are still there, I say to this building. So this building still exists. It gives me a sort of a strange feeling, but if you go to the Gutter Alley in Yokosuka, you can still find this very old building. This is a room in EM Club, which stands for Enlisted Men's Club, an entertainment club for the American soldiers in Yokosuka. So this is where the jazz music in Japan began. And this is a place Japanese were allowed to enter only when they were accompanied by Americans. But in the 1990s, this club was demolished. And when I took this photograph, it was closed down for about 10 years. It was really abandoned and derelict. And then it was demolished officially. And this EM club enlisted men's club is part of the point of origin for my life. My high school friend got engaged with American soldier, and she wanted to introduce her boyfriend to me, and we went to this theater together to see a film. And for the first time I met him, he was in a uniform, and the three of us together sat in the theater and saw the film. And the first image we saw in the theater projection is the American national flag, Stars and Stripes. A very big image of the Stars and Stripes swaying in the projection, and there was the American national anthem played in the theater. And I didn't know how to express it. I really felt hurt. I am here in Japan, and here it's like America. Where am I? Why am I here? I was 18 years old, and I felt hurt. And that was a trauma for me. And since then, that trauma has stayed deep inside my heart. So when I revisited Yokosuka at the age of 18, and this is the second time I went to, and it was 1 month before the building was demolished, and I felt an urge that I had to take a photograph of this. So the buildings encapsulates time past, and this building was waiting for the time of being demolished, and this building had a rather bad memory for me, but I felt a sort of affection toward this building. I felt that this building captures time past, and right before the demolition of this building, I entered into this derelict building EM Club. After an absence of many years, this is my mother. At 23 years old. Before war, at the age of 18, well, actually she was born in 1916, and at the age of 18, she got a driver's license. So it was before World War II. How can I put this? She was from a family of once a rich farmer, but when she was born, the family was already poor, and the family had many children, and she was given to an adopted family. That was a store, and she was about to be forced into marriage with a leading member of a store, and she was given to that adopted family on the condition that she would be able to go to a girls' school or college. Of course, my mother had no idea of getting married this man, and she fled from that adopted family's house and go back to her own family. But her family was already very poor, so she had to find out the way to make money. And she told her parents that she wanted to get a driver's license, and this is in Gunma Prefecture, a countryside. And she was the second woman who got the driver's license. The first woman got a driver's license, but she didn't drive almost at all. And she had to take a driver's license in order to work. And she was a taxi driver, a professional taxi driver. And around that time, the cars in Japan were foreign cars. And this is Chrysler's car of 1953. And she had this driver's license when the father, she met my father at the workplace, and my father, for various financial economic troubles, came to Yokosuka, living away from my mother, and Actually, my mother also drove jeeps for American soldiers. And actually, the U.S. Military was hiring a lot of women drivers, four women drivers hired to drive military's jeeps. And my mother had no job after we all moved to Yokosuka. So right after we moved, she began driving jeeps for American soldiers. So in a sense, Yokosuka received certain benefits from the presence of American military, but in a sense, Yokosuka was a place which gave me a great culture shock of various meanings and perspectives, but it really carried a very heavy meaning in implications for me. And my mother died in 2000. And actually, I wasn't communicating very well with my mother. I didn't know how to communicate well with my mother. And before her death 5 years ago, my father died. And then 5 years later, my mother died.
So when I wanted to speak to her, she was already dead. That's why I decided to take photographs of items that she left. So these are the things which are left behind. And I was starting to take these photos as if I am speaking with her. So this is an denture. This is not really usually regarded as a memento, but this denture has some sense of attachment in myself, and there are many dentures like these. So those are things left behind, but there's no must to use this denture anymore. And in a previous picture, they used lipstick. There are no lips for which this lipstick is used. But these are the things which were used by my mother, and those still exist in front of me myself. And I felt something. That's why I started taking these photos. And in year 2005, so after my mother died, so 5 years after my mother died, I joined the Venice Biennale, and commissioner was Kasahara-san, and she was the third female commissioner. And the first and second female commissioner, well, they didn't use any female artist, but she, as a third commissioner, invited me. And Kasahara-san, commissioner, a third female commissioner, and I myself, as the first female artist, called upon by a female commissioner. So we went to the Venice Biennale, and this was used as a poster. And I was there for about 6 months. I went there to Venice for 3 times. This exhibition was there for about 6 months. And my mother doesn't like to show her dentures or her underwears like this. But I decided to use these works in Japan Pavilion of Venezia Biennale 2005. And as I say, I went to the Venice myself 3 times. And I felt like my mother was breathing the air of Venice, and my mother, I felt, seems to be enjoying the environment of Venice. Venice, and those pictures became independent. They started to take their own life, and this used to belong to my mother, but this object and garment became something which belonged to any mother. So it started to carry some kind of universality, and these photos had become independent. And I believe great works often started to take on their own life. And my mother had a burn, very severe burn, and she was cooking by using an oil, and she got oil, and she got a burn, and she actually threw the oil, which is on fire, onto the backyard. At that time, she got this burn. And I had another series which is called the scars, and I was taking photographs of scars, bruises on human bodies. And I wanted to take scars of my mother, but I couldn't find any opportunity. But when she became 84 years old, on the day of birthday, I asked her to take photo of her scars, and she said, yes. And then I took this picture. And around that time, there is a museum, Okamoto Taro Museum, in Kawasaki City, and it's exhibited works which are related to earthquakes. And my mother experienced the Kanto Great Earthquake and also Hanshin Awaji Great Earthquakes. And this burn, or this scar itself, is not related to these disasters, earthquakes, but through these scars of my mother's body that I take these pictures. And on September 1st, this is the first day of Okamoto Taro, an exhibition I discussed. And my mother was already hospitalized, and she got hepatitis C, and because of the blood transfusion. And then she died in December, in 3 months. So this scar was taken just before she died. So I myself was not prepared. I was not ready to accept my mother's death, and I had a great sense of loss, and I couldn't figure out how I can mend my mental scars. And then I took those photos I showed before when she returned from the incineration facility. And in 2006, after the 2005 Venice Biennale, there was another exhibition at Tokyo, a museum in Tokyo, and so next I was approached by a person saying, why don't you take photo of Hiroshima? I was a little bit surprised. But an editor who wanted to create a collection of photographs, so this editor approached me and asking, why don't you take photographs? And I asked why. Why should I take photos? And he said, only art will stay in Hiroshima. Only art will remain in Hiroshima. And I didn't go to Hiroshima. I didn't have any time to go to Hiroshima at that time because I didn't want to go to Hiroshima for sightseeing. And many photographers are dealing with Hiroshima. Therefore, almost all the expressions concerning Hiroshima were already there. So I thought there's nothing left if I go to Hiroshima, there's nothing left for me to photograph. But I have never been there to Hiroshima. Therefore, I just thought I should try. And I went to Hiroshima in 2007. This was the first trip to Hiroshima for myself. And I went to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. This is official name of this museum, but I call it an atomic bomb museum. And if you go to Hiroshima, there are many facilities or streets of which names include peace, like a peace museum, peace street, a peace whatever. And I felt it a little bit odd. And then I took a picture of this picture. This picture was posted next to a shop in the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. And I don't know why, but anyway, this picture was torn in the middle, and that is taped. And this was taken in fall 1945 by American soldier. This is part of 360-degree panorama picture. So this picture had such a scar in itself. It had a tear, and somehow I was attracted, so I photographed this picture. And I went to a Hiroshima Dome. I saw that dome is quite small, and Hiroshima Dome is a symbol of anti-war activities. And I had different impressions on Hiroshima Dome, or different images of Hiroshima Dome. And I went to the Hiroshima Dome. I thought, oh, this dome is smaller than I thought. It's kind of cute. So I thought I might be able to photograph Hiroshima. I like this one-piece dress. I don't wear it, but I like garment like this one. And there's a database, and everybody can access database of these photographs. And I picked out those one-piece type of dresses from the database. And this is one of the first pictures I took. I call it a commode garçon. Why I call it? Because we don't know who contributed this garment to the museum. And Hiroshima cannot exhibit this kind of garment if they don't know who gave this garment to the museum. And why they don't have any names of the owners of those garments is because those garments which survived atomic bomb were bestowed to the museum in an earlier phase. Therefore, there's no data-taking exercises around that time. And Kawakubo of Commode Garçon in the Paris collection presented a dress, and it's called like Genbaku look. And she actually presented a little bit shabby one-piece dresses, and they are called like Genbaku look. And that's why I call it Commode Garçon. And I was a little bit surprised when I looked at these items which are left behind, because quality of garment is very high and designs is very good. And I was studying textile and weaving when I was a student, so I know textile better than other people, how it is made, how it is woven. And those garments, I didn't see those garments in color, so I saw those pictures. They are always in black and white. But I actually went there and I saw them, and those are in color. I saw they are so cool and fashionable. And those those garments are just ordinary. And I saw if I had been in Hiroshima on that day in August 1945 in Hiroshima. I could have been the one who wore this garment, and that was kind of a sense I felt, and I decided to take these photos. And this is about a blouse. So, of course, I need their help when doing my work, and there is an assistant curator at the museum. And she works with me all the time when I go to the museum. And buttons and hooks, gloves and socks. And she said, "You are the first person who photographed these items, and I like these details." And this button itself is designed after a rose flower. I thought this is fashionable, this is cool. And this curator said that she didn't notice those beauty or those small details of the items. And that is, of course, a great thing. And I use a 35mm freehand, and it's very easy to go to different distance from those items. So I don't use any tripod and legs, and I just use a hand-free style to take photos. This is a wristwatch. So Hiroshima used to be a military port, and Hiroshima is basically open to the overseas because it's had a port, so it's had trade connections or other connections with overseas. So this watch could have been imported from overseas to Japan, and I believe this is cool. And this one is an ivory-made eyeglasses. These eyeglasses are broken, and this was separately stored, but I just set them up in this arrangement and photographed. And this is a uniform of nurses. This was taken 2 years ago. In 2007, for about a year, I photographed these in order to make a collection of photos. And this project was already completed, but I still go to Hiroshima to photograph them because still this museum receives those items from bereaved family. And this year I'll go to Hiroshima once again, and this one came to the museum just 2 years ago. So still these garment items survived on the bombing flowing into the museum. So it's been a while since this bombing, but still those items are coming to the museum. And once they come to the museum, those personal items, those personal garment and items become public ones. And so there's data of 71 years ago and how this girl died and who contributed this item to the museum. So there's such a database and you can access all of those information, but I don't refer to those information because I'm not photographing history. I want to encounter those uniforms or garments. I want to share same time with these items and garments. So I am photographing the reality. And of course, I saw the different photographs of Hiroshima. But for me, those photographs are not records. Those photographs do not claim anything. So I, by chance, have met these items. So I am taking these photos as a personal relation to Hiroshima. And one thing I noticed, this is a silk garment. This is a blouse made out of silk. And this is a blouse of a schoolgirl, I believe. And this blouse was hung in the bend of a bridge, and she is still missing. Only this blouse was found, but she is still missing. So for me, I wanted to make this blouse in a good looking way so that anytime she can come back and wear it. And this was also taken 2 years ago. Last year marked the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, and together with Modern Art Museum of Hiroshima and also the Prefecture Museum. And this blouse was made by a person who's still alive, and last year, because of the 70th anniversary, there was an NHK TV program which features these persons who made this garment, and still people are coming to the museum, contribute these items and a garment to the museum, and TV program person came to me, why don't you meet this person or these people who still come to the museum bestowing the items left behind in the museum. But I didn't meet them, but I decided to photograph these. And this pink color is blood, comes from blood. I thought in the beginning this is pink color blood, but this is a blood from her sister when she died. So this is a blood when she died. Well, I don't want to hear these stories, but I heard it. So probably this is a very precious item for her because she made it herself, and she decided to give it away to the museum. So the reality and what I do in photographing, there is a gap between what I do and also reality that can be found in these items. So when it comes to Hiroshima, what I wanted to do is to liberate the city. And recently I started saying I want to personalize Hiroshima. So Hiroshima of my own. I want to make it my Hiroshima. So this is what I think when I'm photographing these items. So as I said, another one-piece dress was contributed to the museum, and I accessed the database, and I was surprised. Still, such an well-designed, high-quality garment is owned by beloved family, and they are still coming to the museum. I have not seen it face to face yet, but I will go to Hiroshima back again in September to take photo of that garment. And since October last year to February this year, in the Los Angeles Paul Getty Museum, my exhibition was organized with the title Post-War Shadow. And curator for this exhibition was in her 30s, in the middle of 30s, like 34 years old or so. And she approached me saying, we have this plan for exhibition, so why don't you join? I was surprised because this is a U.S. museum. They decided to organize an exhibit called the Post-War Shadows. And this is pictures of our catalog. And my works from Yokosuka to Hiroshima were exhibited in this special exhibition. And I began taking photos in Yokosuka, and I was approached by a journal editor, and I started to photograph in Hiroshima. But now Hiroshima is something personal. So I am taking photos of Hiroshima as my own work, my personal work. And then, the exhibit project came along. So it wasn't like a memorial of the 70 years anniversary of the end of World War, but I was so impressed. Such young woman in the U.S. is interested in this kind of stories. So young people, there's many young people who want to know about these things. And this is the last hall of the Getty Museum. There are 7 rooms. This room is for the exhibition of Hiroshima. And the biggest photo is like 2 meter high. And this is colored in light blue. And Paul Getty's 7 museum start with a pink room, and this is a light blue colored museum, and this is the exhibition called Post-War Shadows. Then with this, is my work already completed? I don't think so. I am now at starting point. This is the beginning of next journey. And now in Tokyo, in Ginza district, there's a gallery called Seido Gallery. So until August 27, I have exhibit for the Frida Kahlo. Why am I related to Frida Kahlo? Is because in the Venice Biennale, the curator for that approached me saying, why don't you photograph those items on a garment left behind by Frida Kahlo? So I went to Mexico for 3 weeks and photographed these items. Frida Kahlo had pediatric paralysis when she was 6 years old, and she had a traffic accident when she was 18 years old, and she died in her 40s. And she is, for me, a representative person of expression. And she had many scandalous rumors, and I went to Mexico, and I thought I met a different Frida Kahlo. So I began taking photographs of the things which are left behind, starting from the Mother series, and I moved on to Hiroshima, and now the Frida Kahlo. So those items are still there. Although people who own them already died, but these are still there, they still exist, and there's certain meaning why they still here. And when I was taking the items from the Frida Kahlo, I felt that I was photographing items and garments which are left behind in Hiroshima. And I saw that Frida Kahlo is trying to communicate something to us, and also that I felt for taking photographs in Hiroshima. So those garments wanted to convey their messages to the next generation. So those things which are left behind, they are left behind for the future. That's I felt when I was taking those items of Frida Kahlo. And she had a shorter right leg like this because of the pediatric palsy, and she had a different height for high heel. And she was very strong, and she also supplemented her own body by using these different things. Of course, our body is fragile. It's a flesh, so it's disappear sometimes in the future. But these items can survive longer than the flesh or blood. And for example, these are boots, pair of boots, worn by Frida Kahlo. So Frida Kahlo died many years ago, but still boots or a set of pair of boots still stay here for the future. Think that's it. As I said, these are donors, because for the case of Hiroshima series, these are the names of donors. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.